Yeah. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to have a special session today. It's February 24th. We are super grateful to have Dr. Jacques Gauthier with us. Lord, we pray blessing on our session today. We thank you, Father, for ever increasing growing in the knowledge of you, in the knowledge of your word, and in the knowledge of how it's unfolding today in real world events. And we want to mention this before, but we want to be able to watch and pray, watch with anointed observation, with a biblical backing, and be able to pray with precision into those things that you are doing, you are unfolding, and you are also really wanting us to know truth and to not buy into cultural lies or, different media lies, but yet what is God really saying? So, anyways, to that end, we have a special session today. It's going to look a little different than we normally do on this platform. We're going to have more teaching. And I'm grateful for this amazing man. He is Dr. Jacques Gauthier. We've known him for many years. He is just absolutely brilliant as an international lawyer with that dissertation. Remember, for those of you that were on last year, he showed us it's 20 pounds to hold in your hand. His PhD dissertation on the Jewish people's legal right to Jerusalem. And isn't that amazing that God raised up a person that would know this when there is so much contention on really, this is the question, whose land is it? Okay, whose land is it? How does that comes up again and again and again? And so the Lord years ago raised him up to study this and become an international voice to the UN, to the EU, to various parliaments, Italian parliament, Canadian parliament, American parliament, and French parliament, many, many others. He is based out of Canada. And we're happy, by the way, that there is is it the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is coming for the first time to Canada, to Ottawa, the nation's capital, and he will be there or part of that. But thank you so much. I'm going to screen you bigger, and please will you, and Lauren, if that doesn't show up, then you do it. But please share with us, as we discussed on by phone yesterday, we want to learn from you. We want to learn to be able to share with others in our sphere of influence and how to pray with wisdom. Dr. Jacques Gauthier, over to you. Thank you.
Patricia, thank you for your introduction. And it was wonderful to be part of this group, I guess, last year. When you invited me to do this again, I was very enthusiastic. I said yes quickly. And the timing, every decade, Jerusalem makes headlines. Every century, every couple of thousand years, it's been on the agenda of the nations for a long, long time. So what I'd like to do today, I will go to some images, a PowerPoint, but I just want to make sure that there's an opportunity for me to connect with you. Because these matters, these issues, these questions are so, so vital. And one could get discouraged because I've been presenting what I believe is the truth from a legal perspective for so many decades. And I've been legal counsel to government. I've been legal counsel to the French Republic for 35 years. And I wish I could tell you, my brothers and sisters, that they all saw the light. They've all understood that they were wrong, that the narratives that float around are not based on truth. And one could get discouraged when you see the assembling, the coalition of the nations at the UN against Israel, often dealing with the very issue of Jerusalem and the title to land that I'm going to address in a few moments. But I'll tell you, as far as I'm concerned, I believe that one of the reasons I live is to present these truths. And whether or not I see the full impact of what I present during my lifetime, or I don't, I'm going to keep doing it. And yet, I am a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. I do not present myself internationally as a Christian. I'm described as a Christian, but my focus is on the legal issues. I want to be perceived as a true scholar. I want people to listen to me. And sadly, if you come in and make too many references to the promised land from God's perspective, then many will just discard you. So what I want to tell you, my brothers and sisters, is that there's nothing I'm going to say today, absolutely nothing, that is meant to diminish or impact your faith in the promises of the Almighty to the Jewish people with regard to Jerusalem, with regard to the land, the land, the ancient land of Israel. These are truths from God that undergird what I do. But I deal with jurists, I deal with members of parliament, I deal with people who don't honor and respect the word of God. So I go to the field of battle, which is politics and law. And under the banner of law, I say the rights to the land, the rights to Jerusalem have been given to the Jewish people. And what you hear day after day, whether it's the UN or different conferences around the world, they're not based on truth. So one of the problems with the work that I do is that the puzzle I try to put together is a huge one. It's like 10,000 pieces. There's so many historical facts that are relevant that it's very easy for those who want to present a false argument, who want to present lies. It's easy to do because most of the people in the audience don't know the facts. And that's why it's important for you to listen to me today. You're not going to be able tomorrow to necessarily make a presentation similar to one that I'm going to make, but I want you, I hope, to believe that my arguments are well-founded, because they are. There is nothing, none of the essential elements of my presentation can be refuted. Can you imagine? I go to Columbia University, I go to places that are hostile, and I say that to them. Try to refute the fundamental elements of my arguments. What you do is the blurring of your political aspirations, your political claims, what you want to see put in place, and pretend that it's legal, pretend that it's a legal argument. I'm telling you that most of what you present is not well-founded in law. It has no merit in law. So you have to listen to what I present. Just on a side issue, what is very important as well is the crisis of identity among our Jewish friends around the world. How can one explain the number of Jewish intellectuals, professors, activists that support the lies of the Palestinians, the lies of the Arabs? And they're very active and they're very articulate. How can that be? It's because they're questioning their identity. Ultimately, they want to be good. They want to be on the right side of history. And yet they hear all these things that are so horrible about Israel. And many of them will just buy in. I had the privilege a number of years ago of sitting in an office in Jerusalem with a man that I really admire, Nathan Sharansky. And he wrote a book, which you probably could find, called In Defense of Identity. And when we met, I gave him a copy of the thesis, and he wrote this inside the book: to Jacques Gauthier, with deep appreciation of your work in defending our identity in friendship, and he signed it. You see, if we can impart these truths about the legal rights, and they reach the young, they educate many, and I need your help in that regard. If we can educate then they won't believe the lie that they're thieves, that they're trespassers, that they're committing genocide. Anything can be thrown at them in this day and age. So the reason so many are confused and stand against the truth is because they're questioning their identity. So what we do in presenting these truths helps them to come to the conclusion that, well, if Dr. Gauthier is right, we didn't steal the land. We have the right to be there. We can choose to negotiate a peace agreement, but it's ours. So that's what I do around the world. And Patricia, when you mentioned my thesis, you said 20 pounds. Well, it is actually, it's a huge document. It's 10 pounds. It's hard. If you have two of them and you exercise in the morning, that
Oh,
becomes
sorry. Okay.
20 pounds. But so the one of the things that I've shared with you, the tremendous impact of this document, which is very thorough, very comprehensive, has given me legitimacy. And you can, each one of you can access the thesis, and you can come back to that later, Patricia. And it's available from the National Library of Israel. There's a link, and you just can access and view the whole thing. So the great thing about the thesis is the weight of it gives me, and the depth of it gives me legitimacy. The big problem with the thesis is that it's so big and so wide and so deep. So it's very difficult in these times when people will like everything Minute Maid, reading a friendly novel of 300 pages is a difficult undertaking for many people these days. But here's the thing. I want the truth out. So what I've done, Patricia, as I've mentioned to you, is I've prepared a new document, a book which should be ready very soon, which is a brief, only
Oh,
for
good.
it's in part a summary of the thesis and plus a lot of new information. So that's going to come out, and it's going to be launched in a way that it gets to many, many places, because there is interest. There is a real interest right now in this kind of information. So let me go back to what the problem is: the blurring. Why do so many accept narratives? The blurring that has been so effective, the machinations of the Palestinians and their friends. And I'm going to give you examples as we go along the way. So perhaps now we can turn to, as quickly as possible, I'll go through a few of the most significant historical events that I usually focus on relating to the rights derived from different events. So here's a peek at the sequence. It's not only identifying the significant events, but it's how they're the nexus between them. How does one event result in something else that's consequential from a legal point of view? I'll start with the Balfour Declaration. I'm going to skip a lot of things. So the Balfour Declaration is actually an event, a document that many people have heard about. Many of the things I'll tell you about today are not known, but the Balfour Declaration is known, but often misconstrued. The Balfour Declaration was an act of the British government, the cabinet, the war cabinet in 1917. They made a decision which resulted in the adoption of a policy supporting the establishment of the Jewish national home in Palestine. Politically, it was exceedingly significant and consequential. Legally, it wasn't directly impactful. Why? Because at the time, the British didn't have possession of Palestine, they didn't have title to Palestine. And you know that when you buy a house somewhere or a piece of property, you want to make sure that the vendor has title. If you get a title from a valid vendor and who's got all the rights, then you're good. The British didn't have that. However, I look at the Balfour Declaration as you think of the fertilization process, procreation. It was an egg that was released and later on fertilized during other events, which I'll mention in a few moments. So when the Balfour Declaration was adopted by the British War Cabinet, and the declaration was conveyed in a letter sent to Rothschild. It was public. It was in the newspapers. It wasn't secret, but it was impacted by a document that many of you have heard about. It was a publication of Herzl's The Jewish State. And note the subtitle, An Attempt at a Modern Solution to the Jewish Question. The Jewish question, my brothers and sisters, is not a question for the Jews. It's a question for humanity, for mankind, for human beings. The way we have persecuted, mistreated the Jews over the centuries, it's an abomination. And it's a problem of the nations, not the problems of just the Jewish people. So I now take you to the Paris Peace Conference. After 1917, the Balfour Declaration. 1919, the war is over, the biggest war of all times. Millions have died. The nations are freaked out because of what's happened. Its cost is incredible. So they meet for 6 months at the Quai d'Orsay in Paris. And there's much to be said about that, but you have to remember this. At the Quai d'Orsay, the Allied powers are together, but it's the principal Allied powers that make the decisions that are very relevant. 5 nations. It's the British, the French, Italy, Japan, and the US. They get title from defeated nations and are in a position to give title to others. So 2 presentations are made in Paris, one from the Arabs, one from the Jewish delegation, the Arabs led by Faisal, the Jews by Weizmann. Here's the composition of those who were there during the hearing on February 6th of 1919, when the Arabs made their presentation. So think of this as a court of appeal. The judges are sitting there and parties are making claims and presentations. These are the nations that have the power of determination and disposition relating to title. And during their presentation, the Arabs asked for recognition as a people to be given rights under international law. They want independence of territories that had been for centuries controlled by the Turks. The Turks controlled these areas for over 400 years. And they wanted independence, one state or many states. In the midst of their presentation, nota bene, they state, as far as Palestine is concerned, because of its universal character, they're not asking for that territory to be part of the Arab state or states. There was an agreement made between Weizmann and Faisal in January of 1919, where the 2 leaders committed to support the national aspirations of the other, believe it or not. They supported each other. On February 27, this is a date all of you should note, 1919. That's when the Zionist delegation presents its case. So if any of you have ever been to court, what happens in court is that you present a statement of claim. You must recognize that legal document. That's where your desiderata, your aspirations are summarized, and you basically present it to the judges with the power of disposition, and you say, please grant me what is before you today. So what the delegation presents is a detailed document. Can't go into the details now, but in that document, they say, we want you, principal powers, to recognize our historical connection with this land, the ancient land of the Jewish people in the Middle East, and they present a map. Here's a rendition of the map. You'll see there's territory on both sides of the Jordan River. You remember that Moses had allotted territories to certain tribes on the right side, on the east side of the Jordan River, and therefore they wanted that as well. Covenant of the League of Nations, our next very significant milestone. During the Paris Conference, the leaders decided to create the first major international organization called the League of Nations. And together with the Treaty of Versailles in June of 1919, the terms of a treaty called the Covenant. Interesting. I wonder where they got that term from. The Covenant of the League of Nations was adopted. In that very important document, I can't go into the details, but Article 22 is absolutely critical. Why? They introduce a concept that is brand new in international law. Self-determination concepts are not enshrined and they're not elevated into principles of international law during the Paris Peace Conference as a result of the covenant, contrary to what others might say. But there is a system called the mandate system that is included in the covenant, Article 22. And this specifies that there are certain nations where there are people who want to be independent, but they can't. They're not ready for independence. So what they're going to do is give a trust to the League of Nations, which is going to turn around and appoint a mandatory to do the administration, and they will take care of that state. So now I'm telling you something, which is a cornerstone. The result of Article 22 is the establishment of states. States are fully framed and formed as a result of this. The only thing that doesn't happen is that those who are the beneficiaries of the trust don't take care of government and administration until later, until they're ready to do so, until certain things have happened. So, take you to the San Remo Conference. So, if you do research on Jacques Gauthier on the internet, there's been stuff published for decades. Some people refer to me as the San Remo advocate, because I do stress that the defining moment from the perspective of international law is the San Remo Conference of April 1920. The Paris Peace Conference for 6 months involved decisions relating to territories of defeated nations like Germany, like the Hungarian Empire. And they reconfigured the map of Europe. Many of those countries lost territories because they lost the war. They were ceded to others. Those decisions were made in Paris during the first 6 months. But as far as the Ottoman territories, they did not make decisions in Paris. So the Paris Peace Conference continued. It's a continuation in Italy, in the beautiful place called San Remo. I've been there many times, organized conferences there, and I've been privileged with my wife Rani and our kids to be our daughters. We have 4 daughters to be in San Remo to highlight the significance of the Villa de Vachon. I, in fact, at one point rented an apartment in that villa. It's a luxury condominium right now. And right in front of you is one of the where you see the window open. I stayed there, and then it turned out that I stayed for several days in the very room where the Allied powers made the decisions that I'm going to talk to you about now. I have attached to the thesis, therefore you can see those because you're going to have access to the thesis, the minutes, the actual minutes of what took place on April 24, 25. You can read what happened there. And the basic fundamental critical decision made on April 25 was to take the basic policies, the concepts embraced through the Balfour Declaration in 1917 and elevate those and make them part of international law. Why can the principal Allied powers make such decisions? Because you're going to see in a minute that the Turks give them title to all of the relevant territories, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Mesopotamia. They have titles, so they can turn around and do what they want. And at this moment in time, they say, we're going to decide on the basis of one fundamental principle to support the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, meaning a Jewish state. During the meeting, the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Curzon, makes something very clear. The land for the Jewish people is all of Palestine, not a small component of it. Furthermore, the beneficiaries of the trust, this is so important, are not the Jewish people inhabiting Palestine alone. It's the people who are Jewish throughout the world. They become virtual inhabitants, beneficiaries of those rights. And then, during the discussion, they had to deal with a very important question. The representatives of the five allies are there. Again, the US, the British, France, Japan, Italy. Italy is the host. And they say, well, if we're going to give them land, if we're going to give them Palestine, what are the boundaries? What boundaries can we agree upon? And what Lord George, Prime Minister Lord George, he's my friend. I love this man. He was a devout Christian. He read the Bible every day. And he could answer the question, if we're going to base our decision on the principle that we recognize the historical connection between the Jewish people and the Holy Land, and we want to give them the right to reconstitute what they used to have, we have to give them everything between the historic towns of Dan and Beersheba. And because everybody around the boardroom table that day was a little confused and didn't know what he was talking about, he said, well, let me help you. He produced a map. And it was a map from a book by George Adam Smith. And this is a bit of a show and tell moment for you. The book in question, published in 1915. I have an original. I don't know if you can see. The original that was circulated around the table is this book. And you know, when you start to read about the people of the ancient people of Israel, you can come up with books and maps. You know, there are literally thousands and thousands of books. But this one is a very, very pertinent, relevant book from an international law perspective. Because what he did, he said, I want to show you one map in this book. One map, map 34. So my brothers and my sisters, a lot of stuff is being outlined right now, but please do me a favor. Never forget, if you have a phone, take a picture of this slide. Please, never forget map 34. And when I say that that's the map, did it exist? Look, you won't be able to see it, but just, again, sometimes lawyers have to present evidence because people are dubious. People wonder, are you making this up? Look, this is the map. I don't know how well you can see it, but that's the map that's on the screen. It's in the book that I have. And what's important is that Lord George says, we're going to give the Jewish people the land that's on that map. And what is that land? It's the land covered by the kingdoms of David and Solomon 3,000 years ago. So Lord George tells the gathering, if we give them that, we will have in fact honored our commitment to recognize their historical connection. Amazing. Then, after the Remo Conference, this is the Treaty of Sèvres, which with the Turks, I skip the details on that, but in that treaty, the Turks give title to the principal Allied powers. Look at the first draft of the Mandate for Palestine, which is a treaty which comes out of the decisions of the Remo Conference. Do you see what I've highlighted? Is this gray? Are you confused? Do you need to go to law school to understand what this says? That the Turks have renounced title over Palestine and given it to the principal Allied powers. So what my work involves a search, It's a title search. Who has title to Palestine? Who has title to Jerusalem? The answer is that title was given to the principal Allied powers. And they turned around. And in the mandate for Palestine, which was drafted by the British, they turn around and look at what they do. Look at the other paragraph that's highlighted. Please take a picture. They give recognition to the historical connection of the Jewish people to Palestine. Voilà, c'est fini, c'est fait. They give the Jews exactly what they asked for. Excuse me. Remember the map presented by the delegation in Paris? All that is supposed to be part of their Jewish national home. And they add, you have no idea how significant this is. They give them the right to reconstitute what they used to have. To reconstitute. So you have to look at what they used to have. So I take you now to another turning point historically from a legal point of view. Consequential legally. In London, in St. James Palace, some of you may have been there, may know it. That's where King Charles was crowned. We saw him there. In that palace, 8 nations who are members of the Council of the League of Nations gather in July of 1922, and on the 24th of July, please note these nations. Please take a picture. These 8 nations are particularly liable. They should be indicted. They should be pursued for what they're doing today, what Spain is doing, what France is doing, what the British are doing vis-a-vis the Jewish people. Outrageous things. So, mandate for Palestine. It says very clearly that it's the responsibility of the League of Nations, of the trustee, and therefore the mandatory also of the British, to establish a Jewish national home. And all my research, everywhere, people understand what national home means is a state for the Jewish people. And you see what I've underlined here, as laid down in the preamble? That's part of the legal obligation, which I mentioned. It's all about, I want to not go there quite yet, but remember, in the preamble, that's where you got the recognition of the historical connection and the right to reconstitute. So now you've got the mandate for Palestine. It's a treaty. It's a binding treaty. And in that treaty, what happens is this. Very simply, a state is established. There is a state with a territory. There were negotiations between the French and the British to agree on the exact boundaries, and detailed boundaries are set out in my thesis. Got the thesis, you got the boundaries, you've got what is necessary, a population. There's a population there, but in this mandate, it includes the rights of people to immigrate. The Jewish people have the right to come to that land. And there's a government. So all the elements of a state are there. The only thing is that this government is there on a temporary basis until the people in that land are able to govern themselves. Those people are the Jewish people. They have sovereignty entitlements. So I take you now to what happened in Geneva in 1922 after the Cairo conference, when Churchill, Secretary of State, met with the Arabs. They decided that there was too much conflict with the Arabs and they had to make big concessions. And in Cairo, they decided to do something which is not even permitted in the mandate for Palestine. They decided to partition Palestine. And it's at that meeting in Geneva that a memorandum of the British was presented. And on the 16th of September, they agreed to take away a humongous chunk of Palestine that was for the Jewish people. I'll show you in a minute. And create and establish an Arab state in 77% of Palestine. Talk about blurring. Do you know why the Palestinians call themselves Palestinians? They don't want to be known as Arabs, because if you're going to call them Arabs, as parties, they got 77% of Palestine already. Now they got to have a different name, otherwise it looks like it's unfair to the Jews. In this decision in September of 1922, even though the territory would become a semi-autonomous Arab government, the British and the League of Nations committed to the Jews that they would be able to continue to exercise rights under certain sections of the mandate, right to worship, right to establish communities. In the partition area, the Arab, that was a commitment that they were going to honor. They never respected that. So that was Palestine before partition. This is partition. After partition, look at the scope of the area taken away from the Jews. 60,000 square kilometers. They're left with 16,800 kilometers. Can you imagine? And if you look at all the other Arab territories, it's 340,000 square kilometers for the Arabs, resulting from the defeat of the Turks by the British. And the Jews only have 16,800 kilometers left. This is the truth. But today, the world is trying to impose a solution to the problem with the Palestinians, which would take away more of the remnant. Interestingly, I have a map, I have the copy of the original map from the League of Nations. And look at what I've highlighted. It says that within Palestine, within the mandate, an Arab government has been put in place. Just a word about the white paper of 1939, the British white paper. As mandatory, the British had obligations. This is one of the greatest, most obnoxious betrayal by a nation in the history that I studied, the history of mankind. Instead of honoring their obligations, what they do here is adopt a new policy whereby an Arab state is going to be established in Palestine. They're going to limit immigration so that the Jews can never have a majority, which was the whole idea. The whole idea was for Jews to be able to immigrate so that they could have a majority and start their new state. They block that. Absolutely atrocious conduct, and it's hard to imagine how the Almighty could forgive the British for doing this. United Nations is set up in 1945. Just to note that in the Charter of the United Nations is another international treaty. In that treaty, there's a provision, Article 80, which guaranteed the Jews that whatever rights they had before the Charter was adopted would be protected, Article 80. So everything I've been telling you about was supposed to be protected. You know probably about the Partition Resolution of 1947, a recommendation of the General Assembly, never binding. The only way this could have resulted in rights for the Arabs, obligations for the Jews, if the Arabs and Jews had come to an agreement in a treaty, a peace treaty, and this kind of diminution of the state, of the Jewish state had been accepted. The Arabs rejected it. So what you see often is references to the Partition Resolution as if it was a source of law, a source of international. It's not. It never has been. Lies are repeated constantly about the consequence of that. The State Declaration, May 14. This is very important because I'm not going to defend this. I'll just say it. On May 14, the League of Nations had been dissolved. They were dissolved in 1946. The British left Palestine prematurely because they knew the Arabs were about to attack and they wanted the Arabs to prevail. They wanted no Jewish state. So on May 14, the British army left Palestine. The British administrators left Palestine. So on May 14, you have no more trustee, no more mandatory. And the declaration is presented to the world of independence, effective May 15. Please note, a lot of people refer to May 14th as the date of independence. It's not. Effective midnight, May 15. May 15 is the first day, the rebirth, the birth of the new nation of Israel is May 15th. On May 14, the territory of the state of Palestine was everything that was the remnant of Palestine I showed you a few moments ago. It included all of Judea and Samaria, all of the what is now referred to as the Gaza Strip, all of that was the territory of Palestine. On May 15, all of that was part of the state of Israel, the new state of Israel. And in the Declaration of Independence, there's a clear reference to the historic connection that has already been recognized. The war follows. And another area that is blurred all the time, and I want to end my presentation now so we can have time for some questions. The Green Line, another incredible lie. The Green Line was merely an armistice agreement between Jordan and Israel. And in that agreement, it says that there's absolutely no sovereignty rights that flow out of an agreement relating to the lines where they're going to stop fighting. And yet, how often do I read that the Green Line was something, that a source of rights for the Arabs? It wasn't. In 1967, the Six-Day War, Israel repossesses territories, and each of the territory that is apart from the Sinai and the Golan Heights, what Israel is doing is simply taking possession of what was given to them previously. And the Green Line, if you use it, takes away almost a substantial part of Jerusalem, including the entire Old City. But what the nations are asking for right now is for the Jews to vacate, to come out of the Old City completely. They don't want Jews there anymore. Judea and Samaria, filled with holy places. I'm going to end on that note. So I'm going to go back to a full screen so we can, I'm ready to take some of your questions.
Wow, that was just incredible. Thank you so very, very much. Could you just, you went over it quickly. Could you, I should know this, but explain the Green Line again exactly. Like that is where it goes through Jerusalem, right? Could you just extrapolate that for a second?
On July 15th, first day of the life of the new nation, there was an attack by many Arab countries. One of
Yes.
them, Jordan. And they were prepared. They were led by a British colonel, brigadier, and they had arms. The British prevented the Jews from having weapons. The Arabs had arms, and they took over the whole area, which is called the West Bank. And what they did when they stopped fighting is that they put a map on the table, and somebody had a green pen. And they said, this is where we stop fighting. Not a sovereignty line. It's simply armistice line, which under the law of war is encouraged. People, the nations want wars to end, and they're saying, okay, agree on the line where the fighting stops. The nations have distorted that. They've said that is a line where everything beyond the Green Line belongs to the Arabs, even though Jordan contravened international law by attacking Israel. They took all of eastern Jerusalem and the Old City at the same time. And the Green Line goes right through Jerusalem.
Exactly. So what we know, by the way, this was something new to me recently. I'm going to pin myself. That the British, when they left in like on May 14th, 1948, they actually left their equipment and gave it to the Arabs. That was shocking to me. Anyways, that's just a little aside, but there was such a disparity. It was such a miracle that this ragtag army actually won in the first place. But something that's come up again and again, because we also really are praying a lot for Judea and Samaria. And could you just talk to people about the Oslo Accords, really the failure of them, but just help us to understand that for a moment? Because right now we're still dealing, correct, with the Oslo Accords, obviously under President Clinton. But just quick thoughts on that.
Okay, so 1993, they've been, this is after the Yom Kippur War. The Arabs and the Jews have been fighting each other. There have been acts of terrorism. Everybody is exhausted, and they decide to have talks. And the talks take place mainly in Oslo. And the concept underlying the talks is land for peace. And let me add to right now, because I've been interacting with so many Israelis over the years, that very few in Israel today believe in this concept, land for peace.
Right. Right.
But then they did. And the whole idea was to have a 5-year plan to gradually move in the direction of helping the establishment of a Palestinian state. No cession of title, no final agreement, nothing about Jerusalem. But the whole idea is that we'll gradually give you more autonomy. And if you honor your commitment to promote peace and stop terrorism and stop attacking us right, left, and center, then we'll move towards it. So a majority of Israelis still believe, they fantasized that they could get peace if they gave land. Okay, so there was
Wow.
2 accords: the Oslo one, Oslo two, one in '93, the other in '95. The '95 one was extremely consequential because that's where they divided Judea and Samaria in area A, B, and C.
Right.
Easy to remember. A is Arab semi-control. B is both control. C is Israeli almost control everything. And the
Okay.
whole idea is that gradually area A would be enlarged so that they had more territory under their control. Today, nothing has changed. It's still A, B, C. The problem with Oslo is this: it's conditional commitments. If you're sincere about peace, we'll be willing to give land because we want peace too. They were never sincere. They continued to undermine Israel whenever possible, to attack them the minute there was an opportunity to blame Israel for something. And one of the fundamental principles, and I'll end that so we can go to perhaps other questions, is it says in the agreement that the Palestinians are not going to pursue anything unilaterally. They're not going to go to the UN and ask to be recognized as a state, as they've done. They've been doing that for years. So that Oslo agreement, a lawyer is speaking to you now, is dead. Israel has no further obligation under that agreement because all the key essential obligations of the Palestinians have been contravened and violated.
Right.
Nevertheless, there's still an area A, B, and C. There's still a degree of autonomy that they have. So they got what they wanted. Israel didn't get what it wanted. Look at what happened on October 7, 2023.
Right. Wow, 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 wow. If you guys have, questions, you can put it in the chat. I think I might pause the recording there because we want to make sure we just are able to, or Lauren, you can do that.